Welcome back. We're here with Brendan drafting the Magic Online Vintage Cube. This is a bit of a lower powered, more experimental iteration of Vintage Cube. So this is a pretty easy pack one for Brendan. He's just got a piece of power here. Pretty hard to pass power for basically anything really. Uh, there's a few cubes where it's more common to pass power. There's some more experimental stuff going on, but doesn't have to think very long about here. We got, the color of the mocks doesn't matter too much. It just makes Brendan a little more biased towards playing some 2 and 3 mana cards. So here we see Loris, a bit of a build around. Chain Lightning stands out a bit. Solitude. Loris is there's a bit of a real cost to running it as a companion, but I think as a main deck card, it's also quite viable. We've got some pretty reasonable lands here, but yeah, Solitude pulled to the front. That's a great kind of effect for Vintage Cube. It's usually a card you're happy to go down pitching to cast it for free, and it's a pretty real flash threat in the late game, being able to cast it on the end step to try and fight through counter spells. But nothing too exciting in this pack. I mean, the City of Traders and Spira's Headquarters, just pretty good lands you can pick up. Having another look at Loris. Grief can feature some very high upside strategies, so the idea being that you evoke Grief early on, nab an interaction spell out of your opponent's hand and reanimate it, and that usually puts you well ahead in the game. But just picking up a Solitude here. Nothing to really build around, but just a solid card. So, Lightning Bolt, still the GOAT. Pulled it straight to the front here. A couple of removal spells, a sideboard card. Again, nothing too inspiring here or to really build around. Bloodstained Mire pulled out, so fetch lands, always a really high pickup. The color of the fetch lands actually not mattering too much if you're not too experienced playing with them. So generally speaking, you can set up your deck so that Bloodstained Mire can find sources of any color that you're playing, even if you're not playing black or red. Although in Brendan's case, he's already got a red Mox. It's giving him a bit of a bias towards red. I know Brendan personally does quite like to play red. It's a proactive, assertive approach to the game, and it looks like it's kind of down to Bloodstained Mire or Lightning Bolt here. Mire a bit more flexible. Lightning Bolt, he does have a white card, and Solitude, you want to be playing a heavy white deck, but he's happy to pick up Lightning Bolt here. So I think if he can find something to give a bit of direction to his deck, he's ready to lock into anything. All he's got is, 2 removal spells and a acceleration spell, so those can go into any kind of deck. So this iteration of the Magic Online Vintage Cube, the way I see it, there's kind of a pendulum. Every second iteration is the normal Vintage Cube that's trying to focus on the high power stuff, and then in between they have a kind of experimental version where they try out some stuff that might not work, might work. Once it's been tried out and tested, then see if stuff survives for the next iteration. And I think at the moment we're in an experimental iteration. There's some strange inclusions. There's always a couple of new cards from the new set. So that's a experimental, I've forgotten the name of it, but the blue-red draw spell, pretty good for any kind of low to the ground cantripy type of strategy. We do see a couple of blue cards getting passed as well. Expressive iteration, sorry. So Containment Priest, a generally alright white creature. It does help you against combo, which is often a weakness of white. It locks out the reanimator opponents until they can deal with it. or Sacred Foundry. Yeah, just on-color dual land. Very hard to pick up on-color dual lands in a 2-color deck because only one of the 10 color combinations will fit in your red-white deck. And Brennan's got really no reason to change up what he's doing. He's picked up some good red and white cards, ready to play proactive, aggressive strategy, most likely. So I think one of the key things here with his good removal spells already in the pool is maybe looking for something to get going to back up with these removal spells. So if you can start off with some cheap, disruptive, hard to remove creatures, if your opponent's best counterplay is blocking, then your lightning bolts and solitudes are going to really make a big difference. You don't want to overload on that effect and then get stranded passing the turns because your opponent is not playing a creature strategy. Hence, Containment Priest, having good coverage against the Reanimator and combo decks matters quite a lot because it forces them to switch up to a fairer game plan. So here we see Rancor, one of the experimental inclusions. Lingering Souls, some lands, Endurance. Tursa, a relatively new inclusion, but one that's performed pretty well. If you can pair it with ways to get to Threshold, typically a lot of instants and sorceries, it does alright. But it's quite slow by the standards of Vintage Cube. 3 mana for a creature that isn't too impactful if it gets removed immediately, but it looks like the best option in the pack. So I'm keen to see how Tursa Light Shadow performs. It's very much a modern red thing to have a little bit of card filtering, card selection on otherwise aggressive creatures, encouraging you to play more situational cards rather than just loading up on 1-drops, 2-drops, and burn. But I imagine a lot of the time it'll just be cashing in extra lands if necessary. The red 3-drop slot, though, very crowded slot. You've got Gut, Laelia, and Broadside Bombardiers, I would describe as high priority creatures. So you don't want to crowd those out of your deck if you can pick them up. So not a lot of white getting past right now. Through the Breach is more of a combo card. Quite a bit of black getting past. Retrofitter Foundry, a card I'm generally fond of. It matches up very well against... Oh, he's going for the Through the Breach, so not necessarily playing an aggressive strategy. If he can pick up an Emrakul or some other extremely expensive creature to put in through the Breach, you can pivot into something like that. Just using his Lightning Bolt and Solitude as more defensive tools. And Tursa fitting pretty well into a red combo type of strategy. Gives him a bit of card filtering. Maybe a shot at recurring a combo spell, but that's much less likely. So there's a Primeval Titan, unexpectedly absent, great removal spell. Flame Slash. Grabomination is quite an impressive card. In some ways, it's just Grave Titan with a little bit of an improvement. Probably not strong enough to be worth casting with Through the Breach, but Primeval Titan is a classic Through the Breach combination. But he's just going to play it safe with the Flame Slash. So through the Breach, Primeval Titan, a classic kind of modern strategy, and something fast, but without the specific non-basic lands to pair with it. It can be not good enough at closing out the game. So Monstrous Rage, a combat trick from a recent set. very good as combat tricks go, but you are hard pressed to play combat tricks in the face of cards like Swords to Plowshares. So just going to pick up the Cathar there. Just a simple threat, deals with opposing Moxen every now and then. Leyline Binding, a little spicy. If you can, you generally do want to play at least 3 colors for Leyline Binding to be a good pickup. Winds of Abandon, generally a bit of a safer pick. You do overload it a reasonable amount of time. Normally, if the board gets clogged up and there's too many creatures in play, it becomes hard for these red and white creature-based decks to get much traction, but Winds of Abandon gives you something to draw to if the game starts stalling out. And otherwise, Blackcleave Cliffs, if he wants to get into black, he has seen some black cards getting passed around. And Berserk there, probably not the kind of card that he wants to pick up the green combat trick, so just a Blackcleave Cliffs, speculate, maybe wind up playing black. I believe Kolaghan's Command is a great black-red card. This would be a reason for him to move into a Mardu color combination. Chain Lightning, also very serviceable. But Kolaghan's Command, the kind of thing that shines in slower formats like Cube compared to Constructed. It's almost always good. And it has a kind of texture where you don't have to craft a good game state for Kolaghan's Command. If you can just get to the point where you have mana to spare, there's often some kind of recursion loop or value play you can make with it where it generates extra value off of your other cards. If you've got something really annoying to recur, if you can pick apart your opponent's last card, if they're saving removal for something. So he's going to go for Kolaghan's Command. He does only have 2 white cards, so I could see him ditching white and going for a black-red approach based on the black spells he's been seeing. Still a little bit of white coming around. No black card in this pack. Elite Spellbinder. Very nice disruptive card. Hard to block. So Elite Spellbinder is an invitational card featuring the likeness of Polo. These tend to be aimed quite high. Tend to be showing up in Constructed, high picks in Cube. So if you see the name of the world champion on the bottom of the card, you can take a reasonable guess that it's going to be good. So Delayed Blast Fireball. On the face, it's just a sweeper with a bit of a kicker mode. There are some unusual combos you can do with it to cast it from exile and get the cast from exile trigger without having to spend 8 mana. And a speculative dual land always makes red, so if he's splashing green, it's a good pick. So Shallow Grave, Through the Breach, and Tersa Light Shadow really Brennan's options for a combo type of approach. If he can pick up Emrakul, he does have 2 ways to put Emrakul into play, which is pretty nice. Oh, this is a tempting front card. Mother of Runes, I'd say one of the best white cards in the cube. If you can keep it alive for a turn, it's a big nuisance. Often requires at least 2 spells to deal with, and then a 3rd spell to deal with whatever the Mother of Runes is protecting. Otherwise, he can pick up a Traxa if he wants to go down this combo route, or a fetch land. I think whether he wants to go down a combo strategy depends a lot on whether he thinks he's going to be playing black. So, not getting the clearest signals of any particular color being hard to come by, but if he ditches white for black, then black is going to serve him better for a kind of reanimator strategy. He's got ways to discard, ways to cheat things into play. if he picks up white, he'll probably be ditching the Through the Breach and just playing a fair creature strategy. So a bit of a tough choice here, but I think passing on the Atraxa doesn't hurt too much. If he is doing a cheaty strategy, Atraxa is good, but not the best option for him. Whereas for a fair deck, Mother of Runes is well at the top of the list. And it looks like he agrees. So looking like solidly Boros, maybe splashing a bit of black. Parallax Wave, a real weirdo card. If you haven't played with it, it's does a bit of a split role. It protects your own creatures and can also be used to remove your opponent's creatures. It does destroy itself, but the timeline on that is surprisingly long. The game can often be over before Parallax Wave removes itself. So, Lightsclaw Inquisitor, another new card. I think Lightsclaw Inquisitor suffers a bit from the way that your opponent gets the choice of what spell gets taxed, and Brennan's just going to pick up a Fury here. So, another pitch spell. He's being very mana efficient. Lots of cards at 1, 2, or 0 mana. And that's often a good strategy in these more powerful cubes. Staff of the Storyteller, Static Prison, another card that's kind of fading, and if you can end the game before it runs out of time, it's very powerful. Worldspine Worm, probably one of the better cheat targets if he wants to go down this route. So this is kind of his last opportunity. He has to make a decision now. Is he going to be playing a Through the Breach strategy? There's a good chance that the answer is no, but you do have to give some serious consideration towards it. But Goldspan Dragon, pretty good top end. He'd be maybe looking for some bit of mana acceleration to get to 5 mana, especially with Fury and Solitude. A lot of the time, Goldspan is just 5 mana 4/4 flying haste. The treasure production matters a little bit, but it's not the main reason you're playing the card in aggressive strategies. So he's going to pick it up here. So we see Magda, one of the red mana production spells, one that has survived through a surprising number of cube iterations based on it's just kind of quite rare to get this effect at such a low mana cost. So red's 2-drops are often not too impressive. You know, you have to play them because of the way that these red aggressive decks need to position themselves, but they don't get much better than Magda. So even though Magda can look a bit slow and anemic, it's still one of the better options in the slot. And with multiple 5-drops, he wants this kind of treasure production ramp stuff to jump to the end game if he can. You know, Fury, the kind of card that you're happy to cast at 0 mana when you're on the back foot, but it is a real beast once it's in play. A 3/3 double strike is a serious creature that can't really be managed through blockers. So Fireblast, a very aggressive red creature. That's a late Hex Drinker, but I think too late for Brandon to switch up colors here. And Flametongue Kavu, a really good tool in these kind of mid-rangey creature fights. If your opponent is also playing some 3-mana creatures, Kavu is a very efficient distribution of rate because you often want to be casting a removal spell on turn 4 or 5. So you're happy to pay more if it gives you something that you care about, and a 4-power attacker is the kind of thing that you do care about a lot in the mid game. So despite its age, Flametongue Kavu does keep up with modern creatures surprisingly well. I think the first card that's really surpassed it in the same role is Paragoyf. And Paragoyf has shown itself to be one of the really high picks in Vintage Cube, one of the reasons that people play red. So can't be upset about being compared unfavorably to Paragoyf. And Brennan is a little light on 1-mana creatures. I don't know if he has any yet, but with a Mox in his pool, he is quite happy to load up on 2 and 3-mana creatures. Oh, Wasteland is very tempting. Eagles of the North, Arena of Glory. Arena of Glory actually very good with his Fury, so it's a low-cost way to give his more expensive creatures haste, which obviously doesn't matter for Goldspan Dragon, but Fury is definitely one where the haste represents a huge upgrade to the card. So Enduring Innocence, another just kind of mid-rangey card looking to play a longer game. Gets a lot of value in matchups where your opponent is not on combo, so you can take a little bit more time. And I think he was just doing a review there to see how many creatures he has with less than 3 power. And just picking up a solid Wasteland here. I rate Wasteland very highly. Gives you a lot of free wins. Just any time your opponent has drawn less than 4 lands, it represents a big advantage, and being stapled on a colorless land, there's basically no cost to having it in your deck. So nothing really for him in this pack. Greater Gargadon, a really weird card. A lot of the time, it's just you only care about the fact that it lets you sacrifice things at will. So pairing it with cards like Balance or Titania, actually getting the Gargadon into play is not really what the focus of Gargadon decks are about. So we'll see if this makes it in based on some kind of combo you can pick up, but I think that was just a desperation pick. Pack didn't have too much for him. So Mind Collapse, very fair interaction spell. I've definitely seen it in a lot of cubes. It's kind of the right power level where it's not doing anything too outrageous. It's just kind of a normal spell that you can play in any deck and never really does anything unfair. And the window probably is closed on Corpse Dance, but picking up a copy just in case. So the other use he can make for Corpse Dance and Shallow Grave is if he evokes Fury, he can reanimate it, get another removal spell, get in for 6 damage. Similar with Solitude. 3 damage and gain 3. Similar life point swing in these kind of race situations. Carnage Interpreter looks like a great card. He's got tons of ways to convert cards into mana. So Carnage Interpreter lets him restock once his hand's empty. So great play if you've already spent your hand on things like Mox and Solitude and Fury. And I think a bit of an underrated card, regardless of whether you're really building around it. And Brendan's picking it up. So this Triumph, he could play as a bit of mana fixing. The Lightstall Inquisitor has come back around, and without a 1-drop besides Mother of Runes in his deck, I could see him picking this up for curve considerations. Otherwise, Dreadhorde Arcanist, very good with Lightning Bolt, but a little bit awkward here in that his best removal spells are Fury and Solitude, which it doesn't interact with. So he's got Lightning Bolt and Flame Slash that play well with it, but the other thing is you often want to pair Arcanist with more flexible things like Brainstorm and Thoughtseize that you can flashback on any board state. So yeah, without the density of 1-mana spells, the Lightstall Inquisitor is a safer pickup. Doesn't take much to make a 1-mana 2/1 good in Vintage Cube because all you want is just the ratio of mana to power. Kill your opponent as quickly as possible. Yawgmoth's Will probably not making it in, but it does have a interesting intersection with the Evoke Elementals. But you really want to pair it with some Rituals, Lion's Eye Diamond, really Storm combo-y type stuff. Loran, very nice. Card you're happy to play main deck. All these are both great options for him. So Fire Blast if he's going for a more aggressive route, which it looks like he is. Flicker Wisp, it does work with the Evoke Elementals if you can get them in play without evoking them, but it not having Flash makes it harder to combo with them compared to some of the other options that have seen play in Modern, like Not Dead After All and Ephemerate. So you can flicker Carnage Interpreter, Flame Tongue Kavu. He does actually have quite a few hits for Flicker Wisp. So he's going to pick it up. And Enduring Innocence, pretty decent 3-drop. So yeah, Fire Blast, you almost always want to target your opponent with it when they're on 4 or less life, because if you're planning to play a turn after casting it, then sacrificing Mountains is a real cost. So most of the time you just end the game the turn you cast it, and then there was no cost to sacrificing Mountains. Skull Clamp, looking pretty nice here. I think over the years in Vintage Cube, the average toughness of creatures has inflated a little bit, and Skull Clamp has lost a little bit of reputation because it's not as common to have a deck flooded with 1 toughness creatures. But Brendan has actually got quite a lot of 1 toughness creatures you can feed to the Skull Clamp. Ideally, you have something that produces tokens, but I'm actually quite happy often if you play something like Lightstall Inquisitor, they have a 3 toughness creature, you'd much rather cash it in for 2 cards than have it just be locked out of the board entirely. Otherwise, he's got quite a few 2-drops here. Stoneforge Mystic doesn't have enough equipment in his deck yet to pick it up. So if it comes back on the wheel, he'd be thrilled, but I don't think that's so likely for such a high value card. Mutagenic Growth, what is that doing in the cube? Or two more efficient removal spells. So Galvanic Discharge, basically Lightning Bolt in a lot of situations. Not being able to hit your opponent is a really significant drawback, but the rate on Lightning Bolt is so high, you're willing to play it regardless. Pyrokinesis, also very good. So with Pyrokinesis versus Fury, Fury, obviously, you get the option of the creature. Pyrokinesis, you have instant speed. So even when you're tapped out, if your opponent goes for some kind of creature-based combo or lethal attack, you can get them with Pyrokinesis. And while it is in some ways redundant to have all of these pitch spells, you can pitch them to each other. So exiling Fury to Pyrokinesis is not a terrible play. You know, these pitch spells give you a type of card filtering, which makes them better in multiples than you might expect. So Brennan doing one last review if the combo route is open for Woodfall Primus. And I think also a consideration if Fiery Confluence is the kind of card that his deck wants. So again, you really want to be dealing damage to your opponent with it, because 4 mana deal 6 to your opponent is a great deal if you are playing an aggressive strategy. But Brennan might be in for more of a mid-rangey strategy, lots of removal, a bunch of 5-drops, not necessarily trying to end the game on turn 5 or 6. And I think he's really considering the Woodfall Primus here. He's got 3 ways to put it into play. He's got some ways to discard it. So he's going to take it here. Not interested in the Fiery Confluence. Going for the high upside draft. He does have plenty of playables, so he's got space for something more speculative here. Awesome, great options here. Paragoyf, very powerful card. Seething Song helps him cast his 5-drops. And he's going to pick up the Paragoyf here. So yeah, Brennan has got a ton of removal. Some very efficient threats. If his opponent is aiming to get there with other mid-rangey creatures, he has a good advantage there. I like just picking up a fixing land here. He's got tons of spells. And it's very rare to see an on-color fixing land. But there is another one, surprisingly. So Robber of the Rich does synergize with his stuff. He's going to pick up a Lotus Petal. So with his deck a little short on 1-mana creatures, he's going to pick up that acceleration to really skip ahead to 2 and 3 mana. Lean on Karge Tyrant to restock if necessary. Unearth and a good 3-drop. Oh, and Gut is one of the premium red 3-drops. So you usually have something to sacrifice to it. With cards like Carnage Interpreter, you have cards you really don't mind sacrificing, but even just upgrading some random 2-1 or 2-2 into a 4-1 menace that's already attacking, really good. It's got a small interaction with Skull Clamp, so if you've got a 1-2 or something, you can put the Skull Clamp on your creature. Gut replaces the creature with a 4-1, and then you draw 2 cards off the Skull Clamp. But that's a pretty minor aspect. The key thing about Gut is it pushes so much damage so quickly. 4 damage the turn you play it, assuming you've got another creature to attack with. And blocking is really tough when there's multiple menace creatures. So fear of missing out if he wants to shore up his 2-drops. But he's just going to go for Headliner Scarlet. So a lot of the time with Headliner Scarlet, you're playing a deck where you care about the no blocking clause. I think Brennan is heavy enough on removal that he's primarily playing it as a value engine. So obviously he gets a good attack the turn he plays it, but he's aiming to have it in play for a couple turns, draw an extra couple cards off of it. And it looks like, yeah, black is out of here, so the Shallow Grave Fury is not going to be happening tonight. But he's got an excellent curve. Lots of good plays at 3 and 4 mana, so his acceleration is going to be working hard. And quite a lot of ways to get extra cards and extra value. So he kind of wants to get locked into a mid-range slog. If his opponent's playing combo, he can present a reasonable clock, but he is still doing it with 3 mana 2-1s and 2 mana 2-2s, so in terms of killing his opponent ASAP, he hasn't gone so heavy down that route. Instead, he's looking to land some favorable removal spells, get a 3 or 4 drop online early. So Virtue of Loyalty does fit into that kind of plan. Pretty mediocre as a 2-drop, pretty mediocre as a 5-drop, but the access to both of them is really good. And Virtue of Loyalty, the kind of effect that it matters a lot that you get to free roll it, essentially drawing an extra copy of it off of your 2-drop, because one of the challenges with these 5-mana enchantments that require other creatures is it's really hard to draw 5 lands and the creatures and not get run over by your opponent doing something in the meantime. So Mutagenic Growth, the only red-white card here really. Mer Battlesphere, probably not making it in. I think he's considering if Mutagenic Growth is what he wants to go for. It's kind of neat with Fury. It's alright with a lot of his Carnage Interpreter, but just going to go for a Fatal Push here. So Fatal Push, more likely to make it into his deck than Mutagenic Growth, even though I think he's not going to be playing black, most likely. And I think this is a lot of what Brendan likes to do in Vintage Cube. He leans quite heavily on rituals and mana production, and then jumps into the 4+ mana cards ahead of schedule based on a lot of them are costed with the expectation that you're casting them when you're already quite far behind. So cards like Flametongue Kavu and Pyrogoyf, really good deals, but normally you can't play only 4-drops. And in some ways, this is kind of playing aggro the hard way. So instead of just turning all of your cards into damage as quickly as possible, and killing your opponent before they can get anything going, Brendan's kind of saying, I'll let my opponent get a little something going, but I'm going to keep up with it. I'm going to remove their creatures, disrupt things, draw some extra cards. I'm willing to play a long game, even though I'm the proactive deck. Oh, and a cheeky Seething Song. So Seething Song, generally a worse Dark Ritual, but if Brendan had Dark Ritual, he'd definitely be playing it in this deck, if it fit his colors. So he's happy to slot in a worse Dark Ritual. And with Fury in his deck, he does actually have some utility having some of his mana production being on colored spells, because if he gets flooded out and he draws Seething Song, there's actually some utility to just pitching it to Fury, as opposed to a land which he would probably be playing in a similar role. So not much left to pick up for Brendan's deck. He's got a couple of fixing lands. He's got plenty of spells, so the only things he'd really be hoping to get here would be more fixing lands, but we're on the wheel now, so I don't think any of those are going to come back. Maybe pick up a sideboard card or two. I could see him moving into black in game 2 or 3 if it matches up particularly well against what his opponent's doing. So if his opponent is on a fast combo strategy, could play black for a shallow grave approach. So he's got a black-white fixing land, but going to take the cut down. And he did actually get a red-white fixing land around, so that's really nice. He's got almost all of the relevant fixing for his deck that's in the cube. Nicely put together, and we'll jump into the first match. So this is Brendan versus Leo. If I were to guess the weaknesses of Brendan's deck, I think he might be weak to someone with a lot of removal and some kind of combo finish, whether that's Reanimator or Storm, or Planeswalkers. He can have a little bit of difficulty presenting a clock against Planeswalkers. But turn 1 Mother of Runes, very nice. If Leo can't remove this right now, it might all be over for him. So this is where the 0 and 1 mana removal really makes a difference. And he's just going to be passing the turn, so this is a grim sign for Leo, unfortunately. Looks like he's got a Stern Scalding, so being on the draw, huge difference this game. If he could Stern Scalding the Mother of Runes, that would really change how things are going. So he's countered the gut at least. Brennan wisely passing to keep his Mother of Runes from being removed. But it looks like Brennan does have... Leo does have a Necromancy in hand, so if he can line that up, he has the kind of combo that can go over the top of Mother of Runes, and depending what he reanimates, something that Brennan can't interact with his removal spells very profitably. Otherwise, he's got a Brazen Borrower that's just going to be a flyer if Brennan doesn't present a threat soon. And I think that's a Ponder that he's firing off this turn. So digging for some kind of threat or way to get momentum going in the game. He's drawn some great dual lands. So I believe that's a Leyline Binding and a Sneak Attack. Leyline Binding, basically quite bad here. Unless he can find a way to get around the Mother of Runes protection. So I think Leo has got to find a way to close out the game before Brennan just kind of turn it into a race with Brendan. So usually you want to do that through a Reanimate. That's how you keep up with things like Goldspan Dragon. So it's a Counterspell, a Leyline Binding, and I believe a Sneak Attack. So Counterspell would be alright the following turn, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a shuffle here. He's really deliberating on it. The Sneak Attack is very tempting because it is a 1-card setup for a Reanimate style finish. But he's going to put it back, set up for a Leyline Binding later in the game, set up 2 removal spells to deal with the Mother of Runes, and fight through it that way. If Brennan doesn't play anything impressive this turn, then Leo's Counterspell is going to play well here. So we've got an Inspiring Vantage. I think that actually comes in untapped because the Mox does not count. And just passing the turn. So there's a Cathar that Brennan can flash in at the end of Leo's turn to get around the Counterspell. And then if Leo does decide to tap out on his turn 3, then Brennan can slam something big. But we see here the Flametongue Kavu, generally a good card, but on this board, because Leo doesn't have a creature in play, it is unplayable. So I think Brendan a little concerned that he hasn't got enough going on to support his Mother of Runes. He's sent it in to open it up to Leyline Binding. And this might be Leo's only opportunity to remove it. So with Leyline Binding, currently it costs 4. If he gets the right Triome, so now Leyline Binding's down to 2 mana. So even though his fetch land has gotten a tapped land, it's effectively produced 2 mana for him this turn. However, Leo doesn't know that Brendan has got a Cathar Commando ready, so if he Leyline Bindings the Mother of Runes, Cathar Commando can deal with it, The Mother of Runes is back online again. And Leo can't even lean on the counterspell because he's probably going to tap out on his turn here. So just doing the Surveil, keeping it. And this is a little tough for Leo, depending if Brendan would rather have the 3-1 or the Mother of Runes. And I mean, this is the kind of situation that Brendan has said, building his deck, that he doesn't mind so much, so it's just going to be a Cathar Commandant for now. I think if Brendan has... I believe he has a Fury and a Flametongue Kavu, so 2 creatures that he doesn't really want to play. Okay, so Flametongue Kavu has to kill a creature, so he's going to target his Cathar Commando, sacrifice in response to the trigger. So here, he knows that Flametongue Kavu is not going to remove anything from Leo's deck. He's got a Fury in case Leo does play a creature. But that's why we didn't see a Cathar Commando sacrifice on Leo's end step. And the alternative play there would be get back the Mother of Runes, target the Mother of Runes, Mother of Runes protects itself, but that would get in for 3 less damage. So Brendan just keeping the clock going, recognizing that he doesn't need the 5th mana for a Fury, and if he hadn't drawn a land there, he would probably draw a spell that he'd be happy to play instead. Because playing Flametongue Kavu and targeting your own creature is a real desperation move. So Leo's got Expressive Iteration. It's a bit awkward here because he needs double blue for counterspell. So if he plays Iteration, he needs to have a blue, untapped blue land in the top 3 cards if he wants to hold up counterspell. Alternatively, he just plays the Steam Vents, accepts that he doesn't get all the cards off of Iteration. So he gets 1 card in his hand, 1 card on the bottom of his library, and 1 card that he can only play this turn. We see Torsten, 7 mana spell. The Land Cycler. So he's hoping that the 3rd spell is something cheap enough, either a land or a cheap spell. But he doesn't even want a spell here. So it looks like Expressive Iteration is just going to get him 1 card. I think that's a Fractured Identity. So he only gets 1 of these 3 cards. And he's going to take the Fractured Identity. So no Reanimate target. He's going to sit tight on that. Hold up the counterspell. Or just go for the Petty Theft here. So he saw how hard it was for Brennan to get Flametongue Kavu onto the battlefield. The Mother of Runes is the one that he wants to deal with, but it is pretty rough bouncing a 1-mana creature. So the play he's probably setting up here is if he bounces the Mother of Runes, takes 4, and he's just saying, it's so hard to get Flametongue Kavu into play. He's either got to tap his Mother of Runes, in which case Leo's got an opportunity to remove something with Fractured Identity, or he's got to do something else. Brennan, I think just drawing a land there. So we're going to see the target Mother of Runes tap to Mother of Runes play. So now Leo can Fractured Identity the Kavu. That deals with the Kavu and kills the Mother of Runes. He has had to keep tapping out, so his counterspell hasn't gotten used, but if he can stabilize the board, things are looking alright. Brennan with the option of casting Fury or Solitude. I think going for Fury here mainly because it presents a faster clock, dealing 6 damage a turn, but Solitude also, he's seen that Leo seems to be up to some kind of slower combo strategy, so he might be expecting Leo to reanimate something with more than 4 toughness, in which case Solitude's enter ability is going to be stronger. So it looks like Leo is down to Sneak attack and counterspell. He's not going to tap out for the sneak attack just yet. And Necromancy sitting there. But Leo not that interested in stealing any of Brendan's creatures just yet. Goes down to 7 though. The clock is ticking, and Brendan not going to play into this counterspell. His Solitude has flash, so if Leo taps out, he can slam it down. Unlikely that Leo is going to be tapping down below 2 mana now that he's got 6 lands. But it looks like Leo's been stranded with a lot of his combo elements and slower cards. So Brendan not going to slam down Solitude just yet. He had an opportunity through the counterspell, but he doesn't know exactly what Leo is working with. And Leo really trying to find a way to deal with Fury without losing too much on board. So I'm not sure if he's pointing for Mother of Runes or Cathar Commando. He's going to be Mother of Runes, so if he can take a hit, he goes to 1, then he can block Fury every turn. Very risky, but Solitude, if this resolves, Leo's dead, so he's got to counter it. And Leo can't block with the Brazen Borrower, so he's going to... Alright, that's the Mother of Runes down. He's going to go to 1 here, and he doesn't really have a plan to block the Fury. So he's got a card draw spell. These kind of combo strategies normally having a good matchup here, but Leo wasn't able to assemble something in time, so it's looking rough for him. And starting with an unkicked Consult, so he looks at 7 cards. If he can find something to keep him going in there, Memory Lapse and lands won't help him. Demonic Tutor can find something if it's cheap enough, and there's a Flash, which is no good. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, in theory, buying him a turn. He's just got to rack his brains now. Is there something in his deck for 2 mana that's better than Fable of the Mirror Breaker? And he is just going to take the Fable, so nothing for 2 mana. You know, he could Demonic Tutor for a removal spell, possibly, but it doesn't really get him ahead if Brendan's got another threat. So that's a 2/2 Goblin Shaman. Makes a treasure when it attacks, but will likely not be surviving to attack. Brendan is down to the Virtue of Loyalty in a land. And I think assessing, so he can tap out here to get both of them in play at the same time. Gets him an extra counter on the Fury and on the token. His alternative is threatening to cast it at the end of Leo's turn. But with Leo showing counterspells in his deck, Brendan doesn't necessarily want to be casting it on Leo's end step, because then Leo has the mana to counter it. And the main reason to hold it back would be to play around some kind of Wrath effect. But it seems like the Wrath is less likely than a counterspell. And Leo's just going to scoop it up. So game 1 to Brendan. Had a bit of an awkward draw to start there, but he cobbled something together, and turn 1 Mother of Runes unanswered dictated a lot of the way that the game played out. Leo was forced into awkward spots, tapping out at times when he didn't want to, having to dig for desperate plays when normally his suite of removal spells would buy him a lot of time against Brendan. So Brennan's got a 1-drop and a 2-drop. And a 3-drop, so nice start. Bit unfortunate being on the draw, but he does need to rip a land off the top by turn 3. Pretty reasonable to happen. And Leo's just taking a mulligan. So Leo has got the tools to win this matchup. He's got a lot of removal, which is really important here. He's got a reanimator plan that Brendan can't interact very well with. In fact, I would guess Brendan has tried to board out his lightning bolts and other cheap creature removal. Being able to deal damage to Leo is alright, but it's not going to match up very well against a lot of what Leo's got going on. So, and we saw Brendan in game 1 being removal flooded. This is one of the advantages Leo has against him, is Leo's not really playing any creatures worth removing. So, being on the play is important. Having removal is important. Leo's got a demonic tutor, so he can probably set up a reanimation here. And you see when his early plays are a ramp spell and a card filtering spell, there's just no opportunity for Brendan to interact early. So if Brendan doesn't have an early creature, his spells just aren't doing anything. So we're seeing a Lightstall Inquisitor here. So odds are Leo can exile something to this where the 1-mana tax doesn't make a difference. If he exiles a tap land, it doesn't matter. If he exiles, I guess he doesn't want to exile the Archon. But this is a case where it's having a real effect on him. He's looking at Demonic Tutor. That at 3 mana, still reasonable. He can't pitch his ramp spell or his land. And because it puts the card into exile, taxing his Archon is really bad. So yeah, it's going to line up pretty well here. This is exactly the kind of thing Brennan was hoping to have here, because a lot of the other cards in his deck do not play. So, just a ramp spell. We're probably going to see a turn 4 reanimate here. And Archon, one of Leo's threats that's maybe less resilient to removal. And Brendan, he's got 2 artifact removal spells, but they're both too slow, costing 3 mana. So being on the play really matters here for Leo. But he's going to kick it off with Fable. See if Brendan's got a way to deal with the token. And he doesn't need to Demonic Tutor for anything right now because Fable is a discard outlet. Depending how Brendan sees things, he might snap off the Cathar Commando on the Fable to get it out of the way. And Fury here, doing alright. Leo's not too attached to that token, but this is one of the few opportunities Brendan's going to get to have his removal be relevant. But yeah, taking a risk here with the Fable alive and the Talisman. So Leo can discard his Archon here. The Cathar Commando can blow up the Necromancy, so Leo's only going to get 1 Archon trigger, but that 1 Archon trigger is going to take a lot of power off the board. So we'll probably see Brennan loses the Lightstall Inquisitor here. Next turn he takes out the Archon with Loran, gets in for 9 damage. That would put Leo down to 2, which is quite precarious. Well, 5 off of the Archon trigger. So Leo goes to 5. Brennan will have a Tersa Light Shadow to push in damage, but if Leo can get something going off the extra card off the Archon, he'll have Fable the following turn. And actually, Bloodchief's Thirst here is great. So you can snap off the Commando before the trigger. Or after, really. And this is where Brennan, even though he's got interaction for the Necromancy, is going to get set behind quite badly by the Archon. But without a second black source, Leo's got to cash in that Bloodchief's Thirst, look for something a bit more relevant. The balance here actually pretty nice. So instead of doing a reanimation, he can just destroy all the creatures, keep his life total nice and high, and without knowing about Loran, this takes out the Cathar Commando as well. So start with a Ponder. And some reactive spells here. The Memory Lapse, kind of nice. If he had one more mana, he could balance and then leave up Memory Lapse. As is, he might get set a bit too far behind, and we've seen the bounce spell from Brazen Borrower more relevant if he's on the front foot. So depends what the alternatives in Leo's deck are. He'd love some cheap interaction to keep him alive from whatever Brennan deploys after the balance. He's got time with the Demonic Tutor. If he's got time with the Demonic Tutor, then that can set up something really powerful going on. So Brennan has to discard a card, and then he loses all of his creatures. He's probably going to hold on to Loran. It looks like he's getting rid of Goldspan Dragon because he's quite far away from casting it. Notably, the Lightstall Inquisitor kind of backfiring on Brendan, so because the Demonic Tutor is no longer in Leo's hand, it doesn't count for balance. And starting things off with Tersa Light Shadow. Just getting some card filtering. So Brennan, considering if he wants to discard Loran to go to 7 cards in graveyard, but it won't be relevant this turn as Tersa requires more mana in order to use its ability. So Leo untaps with Fable. He's got a reanimation with counterspell backup, so looking really good this game. And Brendan pitching the Loran, saying he's going to go for a high upside play. If he can get an untapped land for Headliner Scarlet, which he has got, he can at least keep the clock going, draw some extra cards. But with an unchecked Archon, and Fable of the Mirror Breaker is going to make copies of it, going to go absolutely crazy. Wraps it all up. So this is exactly Leo's plan that he wants to have against Brendan. Quick reanimate, lots of creature removal, not exposing anything of his own to Brendan's removal, which is key here. So Leo didn't have to take a risk. And Brendan's efficient removal, even though he had artifact removal, he couldn't really work against what Leo had going on. You know, you can blow up the Talisman, but you can't interact with the Demonic Tutor. You can't stop the initial trigger of the Archon. And Brendan taking a mulligan here. He is on the play. And Leo's got Force of Will for something Brendan's up to. Force of Will probably going to be really good here for stopping a 3 or 4 mana play in the mid game. And depending on the blue spell density here, Force of Will can push you down some unusual lines. Things like not casting Ponder if you want to keep it ready. Although with Leo having the normally slow Fractured Identity in hand, I wouldn't be surprised if he's planning to pitch that to Force of Will. So Brendan's got a Skull Clamp, good way of catching up. And he's got a Mox, so this is a pretty great looking hand. Carnage Interpreter to refill. Wasteland if he thinks that Leo's going to stumble on land a bit. And I think that's even a Mother of Runes, so this is about as good of a mulligan hand that Brennan can have. He's looking a few turns in advance, so that Seething Song, Ritual is normally very good with Carnage Interpreter, but he's got to put something back. And it is going to be the Seething Song. So he's just going to focus on hitting his land drops, presenting a turn 1 Mother of Runes to give Leo a headache. And Skull Clamp. So this is pretty rough for Leo. He's got his Force of Will, but none of these cards individually are particularly worth forcing. What he's really wishing he had here... Oh, Balance is amazing. So Balance is a sweeper, but Brennan's even a bit insulated against Balance, because he's got... Artifacts are usually very good against Balance. His hand is so empty that if Leo balances, he's going to wind up empty-handed. So, kicking it off with a Ponder. Man, Mox Ruby has been brutal here. We might be seeing a turn 2 Carnage Interpreter. And in theory, Leo can Force of Will the Carnage Interpreter and then go for a Balance, but that leaves him empty-handed against a Mother of Runes and a Skull Clamp. So Headliner Scarlet there. Brennan probably not going to sacrifice Wasteland just yet. And it's tough here. If he lets this resolve, his balance isn't going to clean up a whole lot. But if he is balancing next turn, he doesn't mind losing cards in hand. So we'll probably see a force on the Carnage Interpreter, followed up by a balance. And if Brendan doesn't top deck a creature for a few turns, Leo's alright. But the Wasteland also, depending what Leo keeps in hand from the balance, he might struggle to hit his land drops in the aftermath. And it's not that tempting to balance a single creature, especially when it costs you 4 other cards in your hand. Funnily enough, the Headliner Scarlet in Brendan's hand, worse than just not drawing a card at all, in some ways. Because if Brendan was empty-handed, then Leo's balance would be much worse. But he's still pretty happy to have a good play here. So, holding on to the balance for a turn. Seeing if Brendan overextends. Headliner Scarlet is down and probably not going to die to a conventional removal spell. So if Leo goes for the balance here, he can choose... If he plays the land before, then him and Brendan are up a land. If he plays the land after, then him and Brendan are down a land. Probably better to be up a land given that Brendan's going to keep the Mox. But then on the other side of things, a lot of Leo's best spells don't cost very much mana. So his Necromancy and some of the other combo-y stuff that his deck's got going on, it's easy to say, oh, you know, Brennan is playing cheap spells in red and white. He needs less lands than Leo, but Leo probably operating better on 2 or 3 lands than Brendan does. But then, of course, the big risk if Leo accepts going down to 2 lands is Brendan keeps the Wasteland, Wastelands him, and then he just never goes above 1 land for the rest of the game. So he is going to play the land first. And he's going to start off with Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So Brennan gets one free card off of his Headliner Scarlet, which is face down. That might be a Goldspan Dragon off the top. So Leo is still at a high enough life total. He can take a reasonable sized hit. His Fable is not going to be counted for balance. So Brendan starting off with a Wasteland, unaware of how impactful it would be to Wasteland the White Source. And passing the turn, no equip. Giving an indication of something suspicious, a 4-mana play in his hand. And Leo looking at just ditching his 2 big creatures. Especially with the Troll here. So once Troll's in the graveyard, then Necromancy is a really nice live draw. He'd like to hit something a little more impactful, but so if he discards the Worldspine Worm, because it doesn't stay in his graveyard forever, he needs to hit it with an instant speed reanimation effect or a Through the Breach. We know Brendan has got both of the instant speed reanimates, so looks like he's going to hold on to the worm, see if he can get to 5 mana for Through the Breach with it. Or a Flash. Flash is probably much more relevant here. So he's ripped Counterspell and a blue land. So a lot of this comes down to whether the card in Brendan's hand is castable. Because if Leo shocks in Breeding Pool, attacks, he can balance and then hold up Counterspell. But having his 2/2 creature is actually a bit of a liability, because this means that his balance is not going to get all of Brendan's creatures. So, access to 3 mana this turn. Looking like he might just be passing with a Counterspell. But Brendan getting a free spell return. Solitude can be evoked from exile. If Brendan wants to. So an equip on the Headliner Scarlet. Not sure what the last card in Brendan's hand is. Putting Leo down to 7 life. And he's got a Flame Tongue Kavu. Ah, that's why he's been holding on to it. So Leo not going to counterspell this one. He actually doesn't mind losing his creature here. He's going to balance, go down to 0 cards in hand. Brendan draws 2 off of the Skull Clamp. Oh, but Leo, he does have a creature. This is one of the troubles of balance, is sometimes you would rather destroy all creatures than let your opponent keep their best one. I mean, in this case, it's hard to say. Brennan would probably keep the Headliner Scarlet, which is not necessarily better than Reflection of Kiki-Jiki. But without Leo having anything really going on with the Reflection, he doesn't really want to be left with Reflection versus Scarlet. So, clarifying that Brennan's Solitude is exiled forever face down. Leo will never know what it is. And just a Jace, so doesn't look like Leo's going to be balancing too soon. Brennan gets access to a Magda and a Lotus Petal. Not the best tools for this point in the game, but being able to cash in Magda with Skull Clamp is pretty good. And that's exactly what he's going to do. So he gets a land and a removal spell. Tough to say what's worth hitting. But he'll take out the Reflection, make sure that nothing crazy is going on. And Legion Extruder, also really good in the face of this balance. So Brandon's going to be left with 4 lands. He can start cashing in his Mox Ruby for a creature at the very least. But his Lotus Petal, being able to turn that into a 3/3. Not sure if Brendan's going to... Yeah, so Brendan not playing the Lotus Petal just yet, which will hurt him through this balance. And Leo's 4-color mana base costing him a bit here, so he can't actually balance and leave up Counterspell. So we'll probably see discard the Archon here. Putting both players down to 2 cards in hand, 4 lands, 0 creatures. But Brennan's got 3 permanents unaffected by balance. And while cashing in the Mox Ruby for a 3/3 doesn't sound amazing, any creature with Skull Clamp is a nuisance. So the die there just indicating that we're in turns, I believe. And this is actually pretty sick here. So he can exile Worldspine Worm, which makes it impossible to put into play with Through the Breach. Of course, Leo's got the treasure for the counterspell. Protecting the Worldspine Worm, but now he doesn't have a treasure for Through the Breach. So he's giving Brendan a lot of time. Brendan can make a 3/3 here. Next turn, Skull Clamp the 3/3 is going to threaten lethal. Looks like Leo just a land. His Worldspine Worm's not going to save him. So there's a 3/3 Golem. Skull Clamp makes it a 4/3. Brendan doesn't know the last card, but he is going to take the match. So, managed to line things up there. Leo didn't manage to land or reanimate. And the balance proved awkward for him. It's a powerful tool, but it's very tough to set up. There's a lot going on with balance. So, match 2, we've got Ben. Ben is playing Mono Green Ramp. Looked like quite an interesting deck. A lot of landfall stuff going on. Some fast bond shenanigans. Both players happy with their hand, and Ben's got the best possible start. Turn 1, Elvish Mystic. I should say best short of some fast bond nonsense. But he's got 3 mana and Brennan's got no permanents in play. And Corsair, a great blocker, gains life, draws cards. Corsair has kept its own in Vintage Cube largely due to its efficient distribution of rate. So it helps keep you alive, and it also gives you an advantage turn after turn, which is a great combination. So Ben sending in the Elvish Mystic for damage, playing out more mana acceleration. He's going to have access to at least 5 mana next turn. And Brendan, unfortunately, not with a threat yet, but... Oh, Fury is... So we're going to see Seething Song for Fury, blowing up almost all of Ben's board. So I think Brendan would rather get all the mana dorks than nag the Corsair. Devastating. So this is where Brendan's abundance of creature removal is really paying off. These cards like Elvish Mystic, they are a very good rate. 1 mana to accelerate your mana like that is amazing, but they open up these ramp decks to small damage spells that they would otherwise be immune to. So you have to play them, but they expose you to things like this Fury play. And we saw from previous turns, Ben didn't have too much going on in the early game. So yeah, there's a 3, 4, 6, and typically 5 mana plays in Ben's hand. Nothing he's excited to play for 2 mana. Next turn, it'll probably be a Mind Stone and hopefully a land drop. So there is the land. But the difference between Ben being able to cast Primetime here, Primeval Titan would have put him pretty solidly in the driver's seat. Doesn't block Fury for free, but it would have put Ben far enough ahead to start attacking himself. Here we'll probably wind up seeing a Pest Infestation for Fury chump blockers at a later date. So Tursa, not the best attacker, just cashing it in for a bit of card selection. But Brennan does have Legion Extruder here. So if he wanted to, he could attack, and then if Ben blocks, finish the Corsair off with Legion Extruder. But he's happy to just fish for something a bit more immediate. Understands that the 2 damage is unlikely to be relevant against Ben at this point, and he's got other tools that he could have top decked to finish off the Corsair. So Ben playing with his hand removal because Brendan has seen every card he's drawn so far. He's got the option of playing the 4/4, which would have a reasonable block, or just making some 1/1s. A much lower risk play, so he gets 4 1/1s. The 4/4 Mightform Harvester, quite a new addition to the cube from Edge of Eternities. It is the kind of offensive tool that Ben can use to upset the race. But without the mana acceleration lining up, he's just fallen quite far behind. And mono green, not really the color to have the tools to catch up. So Brennan sending it in. We'll probably see a chump block of Fury, maybe a double block on the 2/2. Going down to 6 though. That's 2 hits from Elite Spellbinder. Brennan just opting to finish off the Corsair. And Virtue of Loyalty is going to let Brennan keep up with whatever Ben has got going on. So, oh no, the Corsair is not in play. That's been resolved. So Ben's got 6 for Primeval Titan, which is increasingly looking like a worse blocker, but might be his best play. I think on some level he was hoping to get Ouroboros going, start getting +1 counters on his creatures, but Virtue of Loyalty is keeping up with even that. So Brendan just sending it in the air. Knows there's no danger of a sweeper destroying all creatures. So Ben's hope here, if he can play Mightform Harmonizer, his Primeval Titan is going to get its power doubled quite a few times. Brendan is 1 power off of being able to block it for free with the Fury. So with Trample, we've got at least 3 doubles, so that brings it up to 12, 24, 48 trample damage. If Brennan can kill it without blocking it, he'll survive, but otherwise he's looking like he's going to be dead here. And just checking that it really does have that absurd amount of power. And Brendan packing it up, so This is how Ben wins the race. Just creates an enormous trampling creature, and then even though Brennan was on 17, he loses game 1. So nicely lined it up by Ben. Took a huge blow in the early game and made up for it. This time, Brennan back on the play. He's got a Lotus Petal, 2 lands. Probably won't see a turn 1 play, but turn 2 he can play a 3-drop. Ben's got the turn 1 Explore and no 1-mana Accelerate yet. So Brennan, considering if it's worth blowing up the Expiration straight away, but a lot of the work has already been done by it. And Ben just passing without a play. Clearly got something really big he's working up to. So Brendan running out the Headliner Scarlet. Every turn Scarlet's in play, Brendan gets an extra card. So accelerating that out makes a significant difference. This is the kind of thing Brendan's deck is set up to do. Oh, but... So we've got a bit of a ruling here. Headliner Scarlet stops things from blocking the turn it's played, but we're not sure if it applies to creatures that are cast after Headliner Scarlet. So I believe Endurance will not be able to block here. But we've got to get a ruling on here. So normally there'll be a relevant ruling on Scryfall. These kind of effects, a bit confusing. A classic example is Boros Charm grants permanents you control indestructible. There was an era where permanents played after Boros Charm did have indestructible. I believe now they don't. So yes, Endurance cannot block. Ben would have had a great ambush there, but the rules did not line up in his favor. Still, a 3-4 blocker, great against 2-3 power creatures. Hard for Brennan to answer without Pyrokinesis, Fury, or Solitude. So we've got a Delighted Halfling. Oh, and a Natural Order. So Ben's biggest creature is coming into play. We'll see how big is the biggest creature. And it's going to be a Primeval Titan, so Ben's going to get even more lands into play. Looks like a basic forest and a Yavimaya. Oh, an Ancient Tomb. So, Ben probably having a Expel like Pest Infestation to use up these tons and tons of mana that he's gotten. Headliner Scarlet gets an extra card. And Brendan not having a good way to break through here. He doesn't have a flyer yet. And Endurance has reach regardless. He's got Flame Slash, which is an answer to Endurance, but he really wants to deal with the Primeval Titan before it can attack. So we're just seeing an Elite Spellbinder here. Sowing Micah Spawn. So Ancient Tomb lets Ben kick that. He can exile one of Brendan's lands, get a land of his own. Ben's just putting as many lands as possible into play and planning to top deck something off of Natural Draw and Waterlog Grove. And with all of these big creatures here to block, he's bought himself quite a bit of time. I think Brendan also considering if he's going to nab the Exploration here while he's got the mana to spare. And even though he can double block the Primeval Titan to trade with it, it's a route that he doesn't want to go down, because if he's going for these value plays, eventually Ben is going to have too many big creatures that Brennan has to 2-for-1 himself to deal with. So we're seeing a Flame Slash here on the Endurance, and just a passing of the turn. Ben's got a lot of good top decks in his deck now. Paying 3 life to his lands. So we've got a Kick Sowing Micah Spawn, getting rid of Brennan's Sacred Foundry. And Brennan does have 2 red sources in his hand, but his Headliner Scarlet, encouraging him to play lands that he's exiled off the top, is how he's wound up with 3 planes in play. And it looks like Ben is happy to draw things out, just try and block with the Primeval Titan. Resolving the Headliner Scarlet trigger. So Brennan does have Carnage Interpreter, but he can't... Oh, he can cast it because he's drawn the Mox. Mox Ruby continuing to be a good card. So Brennan can get 3 in the air. Probably putting the Skull Clamp on Headliner Scarlet just in case he's pushed into a block with it. Or with the Carnage Interpreter. So 5-5, Skull Clamp pushes it up to a 6-5. Threatens to trade with the Primeval Titan if Ben does send it in. Or alternatively, Brennan can just leave up the Cathar Commando activation in case he's worried about Ben drawing a card. But he's going to start by clamping the Commando. So Interpreter back down to a 3-3. Ben's going to take another draw. Ben can cast almost anything he draws, but he does have to draw something live. And it looks like he's going to draw things out another turn. Which is not great. He's getting pecked by this flyer. He really wants to go on the offensive, but it's looking like he's going to have to kill Brendan in one turn to avoid losing the race. And Brendan maybe considering a removal spell here. Or Seething Song for mana is nice when he's got all of this card advantage going on. So he's got 3 red mana floating, cracking a clue for a card. He's got Tersa Light Shadow in hand. And it looks like he's fishing for something specific. If he can deal 4 extra damage. Oh, Parallax Wave. Great example of Parallax Wave usually not being around long enough for the drawback to matter. Takes out all of Ben's blockers, and Brendan attacks for the win. So, just a bit of a slow start from Ben. Ran out of gas at the critical juncture. And couldn't play defense long enough against all of Brendan's ways to remove blockers. I think so. Brendan's on a double mulligan here. He's going to need a really lean hand. Which is tough against these green decks because you want removal for their 1 mana plays, but if you don't present a threat, then it's rough. And you can easily get locked out of combat, so there's a lot of different tools you want against them. And another turn 1 exploration out of Ben. And Brendan did, I believe he put his enchantment removal spell on the bottom of his library. So Scythecat Cub likely to be a 4-4 this turn, but Ben is out of lands. So Brendan just taking it out, playing a Magda. Oh, and Ben stuck on 3 lands. He's got Endurance as a good blocker. The Lightstall Inquisitor, probably something quite manageable for him, but a nuisance nonetheless. So, Invasion of Ikoria, getting text for 1. Probably not going to be casting it until he has an absurd amount of mana. And he gets the ambush with the Endurance, very nice. And Endurance just putting Brennan's Graveyard on the bottom of his library. So Brennan can cast Carnage Interpreter here, pitch the last spell in his hand. Parallax Wave still a little bit too slow for the circumstances, and he'd rather just get a threat online, start churning through the clues. Try and take advantage of Ben not having enough lands. And it looks like just fetching a forest and passing. So starting with a draw, gets an untapped land and sends in for 5. So if Ben can set up some big green creatures, he can make some good blocks. He's on a pretty healthy life total. Oh, Ouroboride. So this creature goes out of control if it lasts a couple turns. Ben won't have a great block on Carnage Interpreter yet. He'd have to double block, and he really doesn't want to lose the Ouroboride, but this is a 1-turn window when Brendan's 5/5 is going to be enough. This is where Brendan needs a removal spell. Very good chance he's going to have it. He can go looking with clues. Well, only a Lotus Petal. So he can take the risky play. If he cracks another clue, he could find Solitude, get rid of the Ouroboride, bring things down to some kind of parity. He can play out Enduring Innocence, which would ordinarily be a good play, but if he lets Ouroboride live for 1 more turn, the Endurance is too big. And I don't think Brendan can deal with 2 large creatures. So he might just have to go for the high upside play, crack the clue, try to draw exactly Solitude. But it's a tough choice to make. So starting with the Carnage Interpreter attack, Ben's got no reason to block. Just in case Brendan had an instant to pump up the Interpreter before damage. And it's just the Enduring Innocence, so Ouroboride is going to get to go crazy here. Ben's going to be able to comfortably block the 5/5. Probably have another creature that's also going to get huge. And now most of Brendan's removal is dead. So we go to combat. Everything gets 2+1 counters. And this looks pretty grim for Brendan. Oh, but that's Headliner Scarlet, one of his few ways to break through. So Ben cannot block. He's going to take 10 damage. Seeing if there's something that gets him here, but pretty safe to just slam it and go for lethal. And there we have it. Match 2, also a win for Brendan. Headliner Scarlet got to be one of his best tools against green. No blocking against that monster. And we're off to the finals. So, Fergus with a little Lurrus action on the right. That's a pretty significant deck building restriction. In Constructed, it was very easy to build around. Draft, it does get a little harder. There's a little bit more of a cost to it, but Lurrus as a spell is just a real powerhouse. You can say that it's giving you a card every turn, but it's giving you a card of your choice. And you can often pair it with effects like Mother of Runes, where the cards you recur protect the Lurrus, and it's just this loop that's very hard to break up. So it looks like Fergus also on a red-white deck. We'll see Brendan's acceleration and cheap removal playing a big role here. So Brendan's got a lightning bolt he can flash in, but he's also got the Virtue of Loyalty. So if he goes for the block, he kind of forces Fergus to either have a removal spell or spend an extra mana, both of which are not too bad. But it looks like Fergus has got the Burst Lightning, and this is a good opportunity to use it. And this is a big tempo problem for Brendan. He spent 2 mana and been answered for 1 mana. In the early game, it makes a big difference. He can do the reverse to Fergus with this Lightning Bolt, but his mana looks a little awkward because he's got a 3-drop, a 1-drop, and 2 red spells, which are not going to be ideal. I see I spy a black spell in Fergus's hand, so going for a bit of a 3-color value strat. Often necessary with companions because you have to stretch deeper, find more spells for your deck. So Monstrous Rage has been taxed, not going to be cast until mana is pretty much irrelevant for Fergus, and just leveling up the Figure of Destiny to a 2/2. And answered by Brendan. So both these exchanges here, we see spending 2 mana on a creature to get it removed for 1 mana. Usually a bad idea. But Voice of Victory, pretty good here. Gets a good block. Brendan doesn't have a convenient way to remove it, but he does get to have Gut online. So he upgrades the 2/1 into a 4/1 Menace. Presents a lot of damage very quickly. And we'll see if Gut survives. This is a way that Brendan can play a creature and functionally give it haste. There's a lot of ways to generate low value artifacts for him to sacrifice. And not a creature you can manage with blockers. Fergus can bounce it with the Caracas, which is a pretty good exchange on mana, but he doesn't have a 2-mana play that he can do with the remaining 2 mountains. So not likely to be something we see this turn. Paying the cost of being 3 colors here. Otherwise, he's got Winds of Abandon, which you don't want to cast too early in the game. Give your opponent an extra land that represents quite a lot of extra mana. It's a very awkward hand for Fergus. He's got 1 uncastable spell, an X spell that he doesn't particularly want to cast. Stuck on 3 lands. Though Plains is good here. He can deal with the token. And now, so he sends in the Voice, gets 2 1/1s. If he lets Gut block, that's in for 2 damage. But he's not going for the Monstrous Rage here. Just going to pass to Brendan. So he can bounce Gut before Brendan gets to attack and get the trigger. And here it's paid off a little bit because if he bounced Gut too early, Brennan could discard Gut to Tersa Light Shatter and be insulated against Caracas a bit. But he's going to bounce the Tersa. Gut's trigger is not going to be able to do anything. Fergus only takes 2. The Caracas looking very nice here. If he goes for the 4th Erlingus, he can become the Monarch, clear all of Brendan's creatures. Brendan would have a haste creature, but he can pretty safely steal the Monarch back and forth each turn. And these 3-mana legends looking pretty awful in the face of Caracas. Brendan might be put into a situation where he can basically never cast these legends again because the tempo cost is just too high. So Fergus gets a 2-2 with Trample and Haste. Could get in for at least 5 if he wants. But just 3 damage, leaving it back as a blocker. Fergus is now the Monarch, so he gets an extra card each turn. Things are looking really good for Fergus on the back of this Caracas. So, just scrounging around for a Monarch token, or something approximating it. Close enough. So if Brendan's only haste creature is Tersa Light Shatter, he can cast it, but Fergus will bounce it. Gut won't be able to trigger unless Brendan has got a 1 or 0 mana artifact. But if he had a Lotus Petal here, he would force Fergus to at least bounce the Gut. So he hasn't got it here, but he's got some life draws. Otherwise, Flame Tongue Kavu, just good in this kind of mid-range matchup. But it's just he has to get something going, and in the face of Caracas costing him 6 mana, he's fallen really far behind for the Monarch fight. So starting with a Seething Song, Brennan's got 5 mana. Spends 3 on an Elite Spellbinder. And we see wins a land and Kitesail Freebooter. So not the most impactful Spellbinder trigger, but he likes just having a 3-1 flyer in play that is not going to get Caracas discovered. So Monstrous Rage is taxed for 1 mana, Winds of Abandon taxed for 2 mana. And just kind of priced into replaying the Tersa. So because Brendan had 2 plays, Felix is forced to bounce the Gut. So if he wants to protect his Monarch, he would be chump blocking here. And it looks like he's happy to do that. Essentially cashing in the 2-2 to deny Brendan a card. So Voice of Victory, the drawback of it not being so good on defense, a little relevant here. If Fergus has an untapped land, he could exile the Spellbinder, bounce Tersa, keep Brendan from getting the Monarch again. But it looks like he doesn't have an untapped land ready. or he wants to set up for the Kite Sail freebooter. Fergus's tools very aggressively slanted, which means his best way to fight over the Monarch might be to just take it back each turn, but it looks like he's happy to go for one block with the Voice. Doesn't want to trade it off with the Elite Spellbinder. And replaying Gut. Caracas just wasting all of Brendan's time in this game. But it looks like Fergus struggling to capitalize on the mana advantage as well. So, Tersa's gone. Galvanic Discharge, very nice here. Gut's not going to be able to trigger this turn because Brendan's not attacking. Replacing the Monarch marker. And Brendan's just been... He's been paddling upstream trying to get something going in the face of Caracas. So, Justin knows his bobble here. He sees a random spell out of Brendan's hand. That one is a bit relevant to know about. So he knows about 2 out of 3. It looks like a delayed blast fireball in hand. So Fergus can... He could lead with the Kite Sail freebooter, but he knows it's probably not going to get anything out of Brendan's hand. He could pick up Luris and get things going in that direction. But it looks like he's going to just deal with Gut permanently. Make the most of an awkward draw. But if he keeps Brendan's board empty, the Monarch is going to keep pulling him ahead. And the more Fergus draws the game out, has a mana advantage, hits his land drops, draws the extra cards off the Monarch. There's no rush to get Luris online. Oh, Wasteland. Surgical answer for Caracas. Brendan's legends are finally unlocked and he's cheering. His last hidden spell was Headliner Scarlet, so another card that's bad against Caracas. And now Brendan's strategy has been unlocked. We're probably going to see the Monarch being passed back and forth for the next couple of turns. So there's more of an impetus now for Fergus to get some stuff going on. He's got a delayed blast fireball in hand, I believe. Just getting down the freebooter for now. And Inti, this is going to enable Fergus to start getting more power on the board. If he's willing to discard cards for the trigger, which it looks like he's got a redundant land in hand. So, voice gets bigger. Fergus exiles a card that he can play this turn, but he does not have enough mana. Regains the Monarch. Brendan takes 4 damage. Thanks to the mobilize trigger. So now Fergus can start turning these extra resources he's accumulated into advantage on board, suiting up his big creature. He'd like to have removal for the Headliner Scarlet. And Carvu, always tempting to kill the Kitesail Freebooter when it has a card, but I don't think Brendan's too fussed about getting the Lotus Petal this game. So he sends it in, happy to trade Headliner Scarlet for Inti if Fergus presents the opportunity. But Fergus is just going to go for a block with the Kitesail Freebooter, not expose the Inti. And Brendan maybe just playing a Naked Terza, getting the second trigger online. Or a Carnage Interpreter. This is a huge threat. Rather than fighting over resources, Brendan is looking to end the game very quickly. He's got 12 power on board. Next turn, even if he doesn't draw a spell with his 2 draws, he can slam down Virtue of Loyalty, which represents a lot more power on board. So Fergus has the resources, but he's in a spot where it's really hard to convert them into an advantage on board. He's only drawn a discard spell. His Lurrus is very slow. So he goes up to 4 energy here, likely casting a spell for free. And Knight's Whisper, worth casting, but he needs to draw something good off of it. Oh, and is that... I think that's 2 lands. This is rough. Once Caracas was off the battlefield, Brennan just seized a huge tempo advantage, dealt with everything that Fergus had going on. And while Amped Raptor is a good blocker on this board, the Virtue of Loyalty means that he can't really keep up with the growing size of Brendan's creatures. And we see here a desperation play, attacking with Inti just to be able to draw a card. And this is a nice removal spell, but if he takes out the Carnage Interpreter, then his Inti doesn't get blocked for free. He has a reasonable block with the Raptor. So we'll see exactly that. Interpreter second down in Brendan's library. And Brendan happy to trade off that Flame Tongue Carvu given it's so easily blocked by the Amped Raptor. So that was a pretty good turn for Fergus. He did manage to convert all of his cards into regaining some control of the board. And Brendan playing a tap land and going up to an absurd number of clues here. If he runs out of clues, it's been a hell of a game. So just considering what 1-mana spells he could draw off the top that would warrant leaving a land untapped. Funnily enough here, so he'll go with an attack here. But if he had stolen the Monarch, he wouldn't be able to block the Amped Raptor anymore because his Interpreter would be up to a 3-3, and with Fergus's Monstrous Rage, the Amped Raptor can attack into that pretty safely. But Fergus not wanting to go down to 6 here. He's got a Concealing Curtain, so you can take a peek at Brendan's hand, though it is just a land. the relevant thing here is having a 3/4 to block the headliner Scarlet. Alternatively, he can start investing in Lurrus, start recurring things. Lurrus recurring Amped Raptor is some serious business. It recurs the amount of mana you had to spend to get it going. But here, with just 1 mana, we might see an Urza's Bauble. What's the last card? It is a mountain. And an 0/4, about the same as a 3/4 here. So he draws off the Monarch, draws off the Urza's Bauble. Both players getting a surprising amount of card advantage for red-white aggressive decks. And, oh, if this is a Fury or a Solitude, would be great here. Brendan's drawing alive to a lot of his removal that he really needs to deal with the Lurrus right now. And just digging with the clue. He does have a Fury. That's pretty nice. So if the Fury cleans up the Lurrus, he gets a good attack with the Interpreter. And Lurrus not just getting extra cards for Fergus, but the lifelink really mattering. Possibly resolving something here with land plays. There's been a lot of triggers going on. Complex cards involved here. Oh, and it's Solitude. So since that was exiled by Scarlet, he wants to play it first. Deals with the Lurrus. And considering whether it's worth bothering to send in the Scarlet. And he's basically saying he doesn't mind if hedging for if Fergus wants to chump block. Of course, because Interpreter was back down to a 3/3. A lot of sequencing going on with Carnage Interpreter. Size grows and shrinks at strange times. And we see Fergus having to spend a lot of resources to catch up with Brendan's board each turn. But once Brendan can safely play the Virtue of Loyalty, his creatures are going to really scale out of control. I think the time is coming for Fergus to start killing Brendan. So I believe that's an Orcish Bowmasters. But without double black, he can't play the Bowmasters and transform the Concealing Eye to get the extra draw trigger. I think he's just mulling over that exchange just now. So here we've just, I think, rewound it. So the implied play there was Swamp first, then Bowmasters, then Transform the Eye. Brennan draws an extra card, Bowmasters triggers 2 times, and deals with the Solitude. Perfectly fine to fix up in a paper game. You don't want these finals to be decided by these kind of small sequencing errors. And Fergus back in control of the Monarch for now. Brennan also dealing with lots of zones of exiled cards, cards in hand. Headliner Scarlet triggers. So I believe the Flicker Wisp is exiled this turn, or just hiding in his hand. Flicker Wisp can permanently remove the token, or he could go for... Not much else he can do with the Flicker Wisp here. Just a good flying creature. But he's going to start with maybe cracking a clue, but doesn't want to trigger the Bowmasters. Good sportsmanship from both players, making sure that everything's resolving the way it should. And that games are not being decided by players not noticing the consequences of their actions. But it's tough. With Fergus on 9 life, Brennan's going to have a hard time just killing him with damage. Unless Brennan can really get ahead on board, which he seems to be doing alright on board. Oh dear. So Mind Collapse, I believe not deciding the outcome of this game, but I believe the free cast only works on your own turn. So as I said, these players have been playing for a solid 2 hours. There's a lot of cards in play. A lot of stuff going on. Absolutely do not blame Fergus for missing that one. So he takes 5 from the Carnage Interpreter. Brennan takes the Monarch. Brennan draws an extra card. Triggers the Bowmasters. Fergus does have 7 power on board if you can deal with the Flicker Wisp. But Monstrous Rage also represents enough for lethal. So Fergus looks like he's got lethal on board if he goes for it. Brennan could have a removal spell. Weighing up his options. Can he play through a removal spell? And it looks pretty safe. So Monstrous Rage. Adding an extra 3 damage. Regardless of how Brendan blocks, he's going to be taking at least 7, thanks to the trample. But does he have removal for the Orc army? It's a tense moment. Or it's a desperation. Brennan draws a card, takes a damage, and it's not a removal spell, so exhausting game. Fergus manages to pull it through. Can you believe that was all the first game of the finals? The Caracas, the Wasteland. Monarch being passed back and forth. I'm shattered just watching it. So, Brennan on the play with Wasteland is a very nice combination. Just a Skull Clamp to start us off. So it looks like he's got Flicker Wisp and Flame Tongue Kavu. Kavu, a great card in this matchup. Not quite what you need in your opening hand, but Brennan's alright to wait a little bit. So he's got 2 3-drops, 2 4-drops. Probably not going to be sacrificing this Wasteland under these circumstances. And Dreadhorde Arcanist, this is a good example of a deck where Arcanist has good flexibility. It can flashback your Inquisition of Kozilek, flashback a removal spell. Brendan showing the power of Mother of Runes. Even as a 1-drop on turn 3, it's pretty good and not worth sacrificing with the Skull Clamp for the chance that he can untap with it. And let's spin the wheel. What do we got? Oh, removal spell. So, not dealing with the Mother of Runes here. Just hitting the Skull Clamp. Is this a Monstrous Rage? Oh, Lightning Bolt for... a Burst Lightning for the Mother of Runes. That makes sense. So he's cleared up Brendan's board. Brendan can just play Gut, which is alright, but very slow. And it is going to get Burst Lightninged. Oh, this is not great for Brendan. He's not going to expose Gut until he's got another creature to attack with and get the trigger immediately, because losing it to the Dreadhorde Arcanist straight away for no cost is a losing play. But his cards are just not lining up. He really needs to draw land here. So, in for 3, not going to squander the Burst Lightning. Taking a look, seeing what's going on in Brendan's hand. Brendan's first few plays, quite peculiar, so I'm sure Fergus is curious to see what his hand looks like, and this explains a lot. An uncastable Flicker Wisp. Gut facing up, facing very poorly against Dreadhorde Arcanist, and I think clarifying whether Fergus needs to take anything, because Brendan's cards are pretty bad here until he hits his 4th land. But he is going to preemptively deal with Gut, make sure he doesn't get wrecked by a runaway Gut. And Brendan's 4th land still not a second white source, so a little color screwed here. But Flame Tongue Carver is pretty good. So, hitting the Eye takes the most power off the board. Hitting the Arcanist locks out the Burst Lightning, so that makes a lot of sense, but it means Brendan's committing to taking 5 damage next turn. So with the equip there, we might see a chump block with the Kavu. But keeping it around for the combo with Flicker Wisp is also pretty good. So if Brendan lands Flicker Wisp this following turn, he can reuse the Kavu, kill something, play Parallax Wave the turn after that. That lets him get 2 more Kavu triggers if he wants to space things out. So we're looking at Brendan maybe getting 3 extra kills with this Kavu. Oh, but Bowmasters punishing the 1 toughness creatures. Brendan at least gets 2 cards for his trouble. Oh, and the two cards trigger the Bowmasters twice more. Now this is Fergus really getting things going. I could definitely see him taking the Parallax Wave here just as one of Brendan's best tools for catching up. The Shock has some good targets, but... Well, I should say, if you don't take the Shock here, then the Legion Extruder, then Brendan can Extruder, kill the Freebooter, get back the Parallax Wave, and if he drew a Plains, he can cast the Parallax Wave anyway, so this does make more sense. In for 5, Brendan's down to 9. Fergus has pulled way ahead here. And this is the struggle when Brendan doesn't have his fast mana. He got a bit stranded on his 4 and 5 drops. He did get mana screwed. Or I should say his 3 and 4 drops. Didn't draw a second white source. So he's definitely pitching the mountain here, and it looks like he's giving up on the Flicker Wisp as well. But that is 2 Bowmaster triggers, which is also going to cost him dearly. Also, he can play the Parallax Wave here. This keeps him alive, but he's also out of resources. So Parallax Wave, probably removing 3 creatures. I would speculate. So he can remove 4 creatures for 2 turns, or 3 creatures for 3 turns. If he exiles the Orc Army token, then it's not coming back later. So that's a pretty safe hit. He'll probably want to hit the Freebooter at some point, so he can play the Legion Extruder. And then I could see him going for the Revealing Eye just because it's the hardest to block. So, Orc Army dealt with. This buys Brendan a ton of time. And because Parallax Wave costs no mana and can be activated at instant speed, you don't have to rush on it. See how things shake out. This helps Brendan if Fergus is looking at a Monstrous Rage or some kind of tricky play. Brendan can force Fergus to commit to an attack before firing off the Parallax Wave. So not sure which phase we're in. Brendan has used the Parallax Wave to get his Legion Extruder back to hand. And yes, when the Revealing Eye comes back, it will come back on the front side. So Fergus just going down the Lurrus path. Doesn't want to play it out in the face of Legion Extruder just yet. But when he has 5 mana to spare, he can play Lurrus, recur Dreadhorde Arcanist. Dreadhorde Arcanist can recur other spells. You see this recursion engine that assembles itself because it lets you select for the cards that let you select more cards. Or just a tap land. Brandon would like to save the Legion Extruder for the Lurrus, but he also... There's a lot of upside to playing it now, dealing with probably the Bowmasters, and then once he starts making tokens, he's got the Skull Clamp going, he'll have Tersa Light Shatter going soon. So he's kind of got a choice here of forcing Fergus to wait on Lurrus an extra turn if he wants to keep it alive. So if Brandon wants an opportunity to break up the Lurrus engine, or he can just get Legion Extruder down, start going for his own engine. and see if he can catch up with what Fergus is doing. And I believe Fergus currently can only recur a Burst Lightning. But Brendan playing it safe, waiting. Fergus has drawn a Monstrous Rage. Terza Lightshatter making a good blocker, but Fergus is in no rush. The fading is on his side. And if Brendan uses the last counter to remove something of Fergus's, then Fergus gets his stuff back a turn early. So Brendan went for the block with Terza Lightshatter, traded with the Monstrous Rage plus Orcish Bowmasters. There's one more turn on the Parallax Wave. So this is probably Brendan's best shot to play the Legion Extruder before it gets taken by the Kitesail Freebooter. And he is going to go for that. Fergus just reviewing what's available in his graveyard. And Brendan cashing in his Mox for a 3-3, giving the 3-3 the Skull Clamp so it's insulated against removal a bit. But this is where Fergus's strategy, the intersection of discard spells and must remove creatures, is really good. Brendan's deck is full of removal, but it's felt like he just hasn't been finding it because it's not there on the turn that he needs it. Fergus can bide his time a bit, pick out the removal, play his threats at the right time. He's done a good job of making Brendan's removal really awkward here. And because Brendan has all this removal, he's got these awkward experiences with things like Legion Extruder that he would much rather have a lot of 2-mana creatures than the Legion Extruder, in the way that he's had to play the Extruder. And yet, next turn he's going to be wishing he had it so he could deal with the Lurrus. So, Anthraptor here, about to generate Fergus a bunch of extra mana. It is nice that if he hits a dud, it's just extra energy for the Static Prison. And this might be the case here. So, if he just leaves the Mox in exile... Oh, sorry, Mox is free. 0 mana, so... Doesn't cost him any energy to cast it. The 4 energy means that his Static Prison's going to be around for a long time. Sorry, just had to skip ahead there. So, Parallax Wave sacrificed. Fergus gets to have a look and see Brendan is out of gas. Oh, but he's drawn a 5-drop. Goldspan Dragon. Generally a pretty sweet card here. But he just needs to interact with that Lurrus because every turn Fergus has it in play, he's accumulating more value. And while Fergus will have to sacrifice the Static Prison at some point, it's not happening soon enough to really matter in this game. He's going to pull way ahead if he gets one more turn. So looking at his options, recurring the Arcanist. He's got to put some thought into not getting surprise killed by the Goldspan Dragon, but he's still on 20 and Brendan's on a low enough life total that he can't full send too aggressively. Oh, and Seething Song. Every turn Brendan has really got the pressure on to draw something specific, and it's not lining up that way. And we are in turns here. So hopefully things do not end in a draw. But it's always a possibility. So Fergus can recur Bowmasters with Dolores. Arcanist can bring back Monstrous Rage. I think he's having a bit of thought here to how quickly he can kill Brendan. So if he transforms the Concealing Curtains, he's got a 3-power Menace, which is probably not going to be blocked. So Brendan can block 4 power. Fergus is presenting 6, so from my rough math, I'd say Fergus has got lethal this turn if he sends it all in and Brendan doesn't have anything. And because of the revealing eye, he does know that Brendan doesn't have anything. So if he sends it all in, the Amped Raptor and Lurrus get blocked. Brendan takes 3 from the eye, 1 from the Arcanist, 1 from the Kitesail Freebooter. So that's 5 damage. Monstrous Rage can help push through the last 2, but also a kicked Burst Lightning will do it. So he flashes it back with Dreadhorde Arcanist, pays the extra 4, domes Brendan for 4, and just hits the Goldspan Dragon, and Fergus has done it. He had a great start. Good pairing of all of the discard spells with the must-answer threats. Congratulations to Fergus. Well-deserved win. I'll catch you all next time. This has been the MTGO Vintage Cube. Hope you enjoyed.